Tonight, ceasefire sham.
Hamas has accepted a ceasefire proposal from Egypt and Qatar.
You can right now see how people are celebrating. You can see children.
Hamas says they're ready for a peace deal, just as Israel prepares to finish them off, while American students play right into Hamas's hands. Bill O'Reilly on how the campus protests have finally woken America up to the college racket. Directly to jail.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
A judge in New York finds Trump and threatens him with jail time if he breaks the gag order again.
Our Constitution is much more important than jail. It's not even close. I'll do that sacrifice any day.
Would a trip to the slammer only help Trump take back the White House? And can we all just laugh now?
I know Kim was terrified to be here tonight. Not because of this, but because her kids are home with their dad.
Tom Brady and friends show it's now safe for America to laugh again. Have the days of cancel culture finally become a thing of the past?
Tom also lost $30 million in crypto. Tom, how did you fall for that? I mean, even Gronk was like, me know that not real money. Like...
We'll get to all that in a minute. We start with breaking news a little past 2 a.m. in Israel, where the Israelis now have launched a major offensive into Rafa. That's the last Hamas stronghold in the southern part of Gaza. And you might ask, how is it possible that the Israelis just launched a massive offensive? Because earlier today, we were all told that Hamas agreed to a ceasefire, and everybody celebrated.
There is major breaking news from the Middle East. Hamas has accepted a ceasefire proposal from Egypt and Qatar.
You can right now see how people are celebrating. You can see children. You can see how elderly people, young men are chanting and so excited about the announcement.
That deal includes the release of 33 hostages in exchange for a 40-day truce.
This could be a tremendously significant moment for so many people.
First off, ceasefires are great things. We should all want a ceasefire. If actually what Hamas was agreeing to was a ceasefire, they didn't agree to a ceasefire. Hamas agreed effectively to an Israeli surrender. They called it a ceasefire. And as you heard, the media loved it. So just as a thought experiment, like if you walk into your boss's office tomorrow and say, I agree to a raise, I agree that you, my boss, can double my salary. Not for more work or bringing more value to the company, but I have agreed to doubling my salary, and if you don't double it, you're the evil one. It's laughable. But it's exactly what Hamas just did, and everybody fell for it. Nobody would love a ceasefire more than the Israelis. You saw Richard Engel say the deal would bring home 33 hostages over 40 days. Hamas will not guarantee that the 33 hostages they say they're going to trade are even alive. Hamas will reportedly only agree to release hostages if it includes a permanent ceasefire, meaning Israel surrenders and Hamas gets to stay in power. And that's what this is all about. That's what Hamas wants. But none of those reporters told you that. They just literally took Hamas's words, a terrorist organization, and put them on the screen with zero context about what Hamas is actually agreeing to. Israel has yet to accept peace proposal. Hamas has not agreed to peace either. Hamas has agreed to still controlling the Gaza Strip. That is not peaceful. They promise more attacks on Israel over and over and over again. All weekend on American college campuses, the protesters continued about the Palestinians and people living and suffering in Gaza. Let's be accurate. The suffering in Gaza is awful. Yet the very same people protesting keep parroting the Hamas talking points, and Hamas would love a ceasefire. They'd love a permanent ceasefire. Then they could keep control of Gaza until they break the ceasefire again, because their stated goal is to destroy Israel. The protesters are right, like these, I think, at the University of Michigan. Gaza right now is a hellhole, and the people living there are kept in miserable conditions. So right on for the people protesting on their behalf. Hamas certainly doesn't allow free speech or any kind of protests against Israel. Hamas loves the pictures, and they love the protests, because the world all blames Israel. Israel has yet to accept a peace proposal. It's all on Israel. How about this? Over the weekend, Hamas attacked the main gate into Gaza for humanitarian aid and killed 3 Israeli soldiers. 3 Israeli soldiers were ensuring that aid got to Palestinian civilians, and Hamas killed the Israelis for trying to get aid to the civilians. And the world somehow, all these protesters, the media, blame Israel for the humanitarian crisis. Then Hamas says they agree to Israel surrendering. They call it a ceasefire, and everybody blames Israel for not accepting the deal. That is the Middle East two-step. I lived there for many years. Retired 4-star general, United States Air Force, the 17th Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, General Philip Breedlove is with us in a moment. First NewsNation correspondent Robert Sherman on duty in Tel Aviv, where it is already early Tuesday morning. I thought what was most interesting, Robert, was the fact that the families of the hostages put out a statement saying not, hey, negotiate with Hamas, but we support the invasion of Rafa.
Yes, that was very interesting here, Leland, as you see in which the way that the temperature has really changed here throughout the day, up and down. It's pretty amazing that we're pretty much ending this day right where we started, in which there is not an agreement between both of these sides. And the IDF says, unless we do get a deal, the Rafa operation is on and will be proceeding as planned. We know that there were targeted strikes that were carried out in the southern portion of the enclave here just a couple of hours ago. There is still that window, though, where Israel says they will be sending a delegation to pick up these talks and try and get a deal across the finish line. But both of these sides are not budging from their main areas of contention and their central demands. And so that's what we're all really focused on here is that those two sides are still not coming together at this hour, and there's no indication that they will. Leland?
Yeah, Robert, you've been doing great reporting. I encourage anybody to follow your Twitter account, subscribe to your newsletter. A couple of quick things just in the past couple of minutes. You may not have been aware when you're up on the roof that the Israeli tanks have now entered the southern Gaza town of Rafa. And you think about, there's the hotel in Egypt where you've got the Qatari mediators, you've got the CIA represented by Bill Burns, you've got the head of the Mossad there all negotiating on this. I'm wondering about the domestic politics in Israel, because Israel is as divided perhaps politically as America is, maybe even more so in terms of the feelings of left and right and everything else. But the pressure by President Biden on Prime Minister Netanyahu, has that in some way brought Israel together domestically, that when they feel this pressure, they now have coalesced around Netanyahu a little bit?
I would say that there's more unity than there was, say, a couple of weeks ago, and that you have started to see that coalescing a little bit, Leland. We always see these videos of the demonstrations taking place, criticizing the Israeli government, calling for any kind of a deal to be made. But what I do detect here is a bit of a silent majority, I would say, in which people very hushedly and quietly say that they stand with the government and their intentions of pushing forward into Rafah, because they believe if the job is left undone and Hamas isn't destroyed, a repeat of October 7th is an inevitability. But people don't want to be too outspoken of that, because they are very empathetic of the hostage families and the pain that they're dealing with there. So you do see those diverging thoughts here.
Yeah, the hostage family part is interesting. Statement from their families: we welcome the Prime Minister and War Cabinet on their swift deliberation and decision to send a negotiating delegation to exhaust Hamas's position and turn into a deal for the return of all hostages. Now is the time to demand from the negotiation team and all parties do not return without a signed deal. That does not include do not go in to Rafah, and certainly not accept the deal that Hamas agreed to. Robert Sherman, thank you very much. Back to you as news warrants. Retired 4-star general, 17th Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. General Philip Breedlove is with us, as he is on a lot of nights like this. General, it's good to see you. Just from a tactical standpoint, right now on the ground as tanks are rolling into Rafah, dangerous urban warfare. We learned that during the past Israeli offensive. The Israelis have held off now for months invading Rafah because they were placating the White House, I think they were probably trying to get a deal with Hamas and get some hostages home before more died. How much, in retrospect, has that delay helped Hamas and hurt, for lack of a better term, Israel's momentum?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me back on, Leland. And I would say that you've hit it right on the head. This time has allowed a lot of pressure to build on Israel. As you see what's happening across campuses as the students are being sort of pushed into positions by these outside forces funding them and getting this anti-Israel message out there, a lot of pressure in the media and in the people of our country has been building against Israel. And I think that is going to be the primary ill result of this delay.
Live pictures right now of MIT, where reportedly thousands of people have been bussed in, high school students and the like. Do you think the criticism of Israel and the criticism in the media and pressure that you talked about is fair?
Well, let's just examine what the terrorists are doing. So the terrorists, Hamas, and those that support them, Iran, are now down to a small enclave in the southern part of the country. And the Hamas leadership is wrapping itself in innocence and wrapping itself in hostages so that any action will incur more collateral damage. And this is what Hamas wants. They know they cannot beat Israel militarily, and so they have to win in the world press and in the impressionable people in the world that are watching this dance that is very carefully articulated by Hamas to bring international pressure on Israel. And so I think we just need to recognize this for what it is.
Yeah. No, look, we called it a ceasefire sham at the beginning. And the Hamas is very good. They're very good at playing the game on the world stage. Let's look at this from the United States' standpoint. And you think sort of the way things have developed since October 7th. President Biden now has a team in Cairo trying to help with these negotiations. Obviously put a lot of pressure on the Israelis. He's threatened to withhold aid from the Israelis. And the Israelis have said, thank you very much for all your advice, but pound sand, we're going into Rafa, despite a call today between Netanyahu and President Biden. Is America in a strategically powerful position or weak position right now?
We're in a really tough position. I think if you watched the questioning in the White House today, and as we watched the spokesman try to explain why we are negotiating with terrorists, we all want the right thing for the people of Gaza, for the Palestinians. We do not want this, however, to profit Hamas, and Hamas is carefully making this all turn to their good with the pressure that is building around the relief for the true Palestinian people. And so I think we are in a tough position because Israel is defending itself and is trying to rid the area of the terrorists that broke the last ceasefire. And we are trying to negotiate to keep that from happening.
Great point. Great point, General. We appreciate you being with us. Thank you as always. And look, now that we've got another ground war, more coverage of this to come. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Good night.
Good night, sir. Donald Trump was the most powerful man in the world. Judge Juan Merchan is the most powerful man in his courtroom. Who blinked today? And did the Tom Brady roast show prove it's suddenly safe to laugh again? Brady, Gronk, Kevin Hart, were they the ones to finally spike cancel culture?
Blategate, the NFL spent $20 million and found that it was more probable than not that I was generally aware that someone may have deflated my footballs. You could have just given me the $20 million and I would just told you I did it.
Former President Trump was back in court today and did something that no defendant in any criminal case ever does. He talked again about his willingness to go to jail.
This judge has given me a gag order and say you'll go to jail if you violate it. And frankly, you know what? Our Constitution is much more important than jail. It's not even close. I'll do that sacrifice any day.
All right, the judge said after allegedly Donald Trump violated a gag order again, it's apparent that monetary fines have not and will not suffice. He went on to say, therefore, future violations of its lawful orders by the court will be punishable by incarceration. So if Trump breaks the gag order again, he could end up behind bars. Our good friend, Michael DeSharo, is here, New York City criminal defense attorney. Is the judge being a little bit like, I don't know, like somebody you are, you know, like with your kid, like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to throw you in your room. You're going to have to stay in your room. If you do it the next time, 10 times he violates the gag order. At what point does the world decide the judge ain't that serious?
Thanks for having me, Leland. He's absolutely doing that. The judge is hoping for one thing. Can I run out this clock before I actually have to do something? Because the idea of placing Donald Trump in jail, I want to give you viewers a technical thing. Once you go into Rikers, once you go into the custody of corrections, which is the door behind the court. So once somebody goes in, they open that door, you are now in the custody of corrections. You must give up your cell phone. You must give up all your communications. You must give up everything you have on you. That means removing his ability to communicate with his voters, which, if you believe the polls, he seems to be leading in the polls. So this is something this judge does not want to do in any way, shape, or form.
This would be my question, why he doesn't want to do this, right? I mean, I think reasonable people can agree that Judge Merchan is an avid Democratic enthusiast in terms of his political leanings. Does he not want to do it, you think, because of the precedent it sets, or does he not want to do it because it's going to get overturned on appeals and he'll be even more embarrassed, or he not want to do it because it's going to, I think by any reasonable estimation, really help Donald Trump?
Well, to be benevolent to the judge, I think he doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to take away the right of 80-some-odd million people hearing from this candidate. This is the most unique criminal defendant in the history of the United States. So for a state judge, and let's remember, he's a state judge in what essentially is county court, right? To put him in prison. Additionally, the corrections department would have such a nightmare on their hands. There are no luxury boxes for the former president. There's no, I heard that the spokesman will find a way to house him. Where?
Yeah, well, the Secret Service will have a thing or two to say as well. Is there like home confinement for contempt of court? Could he say, okay, you got to do 2 days at Trump Tower and you can't leave?
He could, but that presents a whole host of issues. Who's going to enforce it? Are you going to send court officers there, or is it because the Secret Service is not under the jurisdiction of a state judge?
Right.
So we're really it's a unique situation that look. I think there's 2 more weeks of this trial, and this judge is just going to go, all right, we're done. Has
Trump sort of outfoxed the judge in a way?
I think he has. I think he has in that Trump understands what's at stake. I think both of these men understand what's at stake in putting him in jail. And I think they're both very savvy. And if the judge was unsavvy, he would have put him in already, which would have been a huge mistake.
Fascinating. Michael, you have been spot on through this all and really sort of uncanny in your ability to predict and see into the future. We'll talk as the trial continues. Looking forward to the testimony of Michael Cohen, as you called months and months ago. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
All right. Columbia University has canceled its graduation because they don't want something like this again. A further blow for kids who already missed their high school graduations. Bill O'Reilly on the campus protests have finally woken up America to the college racket. All right, live pictures of Gaza, where Israel continues its push into Rafa. Back there, with any news that breaks, Israel and Hamas negotiations reportedly still going on in Cairo at this hour. The campus protests, though, are working. And obviously there's these pictures and there's live pictures at MIT. Hamas knows they have allies on America's streets, and it is putting a lot of pressure on the White House. The protesters are also changing the way America thinks about college. Even Saturday Night Live can't ignore it.
Nothing makes me prouder than young people using their voices to fight for what they believe in.
Wow, that's very encouraging. Alphonse, your daughter must feel so supported when she's out there.
What's that now? when whose daughter is out there?
At the protest.
No, man. You bugging. Alexis Vanessa Roberts better have her butt in class.
Bill O'Reilly's here, host of the No Spin News, author of the coming book, Confronting the President's No Spin Assessments from Washington to Biden. Bill, your column on Bill O'Reilly came out over the weekend as well, BillO'Reilly.com. And I thought to myself, if Bill O'Reilly and Saturday Night Live are agreeing on something, then we got to examine exactly what is happening in America's culture.
Well, the protests, as we've established on NewsNation and pretty much anywhere else that's honest, are driven by a very extremist, far-left movement. And we went over who's funding them and all of that, and there's no doubt about it. And then the numbers of students are low. So in New York City at City College, 60% of those arrested were what they call outside agitators, not college students. So when you see this, you say, okay, there are some far-left students. They hate Israel because the far left does across the board. Whatever Israel does is bad. And so they're out there. And they have a right to be out there, but they don't have a right to violate the law or the college administration's rules. And if they do, they should be held to account. That's the story. But when you take a closer look at what's happening at Columbia and other schools, it's indoctrination of students on a much wider scale than Gaza and Israel, and that's what I wrote about in my column entitled Class Warfare. And I took the column, I was inspired by a Steely Dan song, okay, that said, I'm never going back to my old school. You remember that, Leland? You ever hear that song?
No, somehow I missed that. But I did read the column, and I thought you made a really interesting point, because you talked about Marist College, which was the working class college founded by monks, I believe, that you attended, and you wrote about in the column this book called Felix Ever After, and it's a trans rights, trans journey book. And the issue that I think you pointed out really correctly was not the inclusion of this opinion in the rights of trans kids or understanding trans kids, which probably is a noble endeavor, but is the exclusion of all the other opinions. And that's what the revolt is against.
Look, number one, you're a square, Leland. You should catch up on your Steely Dan.
I've been called much worse, Bill.
The bigger story here, it's not the college protests, it's the really big story, is that many working class schools like Marist College, Poughkeepsie, New York, that offered an excellent education and lifted working class kids up into the white collar world, have now gone completely woke. All right? And so this book that you just showed, this is required reading there. And I look back on all the, what they call it, the common read. They're all left-wing books. There's not Killing Jesus in there or Killing the Killers, my book about terrorism. That doesn't exist, and I'm an alumni. Okay? And the college is indoctrinating the students to a progressive point of view. There's nothing wrong with the Felix book. Marginalized people should be protected, and the more understanding we have about them, the better. But you don't exclude traditional reading, which is what they're doing at Marist College. and it breaks my heart to say it, I gave that school more than $1 million for scholarships so kids like me way back when could go there. And I'm crazed now that I actually did that because the school has abandoned all objectivity and all fairness in education. And they're not alone. This probably is the majority of schools around the country. And people need to know it.
All right, but no, I hear you. I think people are waking up to it, right? There's that old line about those who seek power on the back of the tiger end up inside. There's a chance all these administrators end up inside, because if all of a sudden a bunch of parents decide not to take out loans to send their kids to Columbia and MIT and instead go to Ole Miss and the University of Alabama, things change.
Absolutely.
Speaking of Ole Miss, I want to play this clip for you from Ole Miss. Hold on one second. This is from CNN's coverage about Ole Miss, the protests, the counter-protests over the weekend.
Ole Miss has opened an investigation after a confrontation between pro-Palestinian protesters and counter-protesters on the school's campus. Officials citing allegations of offensive and hurtful language and, quote, hostility and racist overtones being portrayed during the heated exchanges. One video in particular shows a group of mostly white men in the counter-protest yelling at a black woman.
In the video, if you watch, it was really mean and wrong what the frat kid did. And look, we can talk about the double standard, that if, you have all these protests with people yelling about Jews and nobody's investigating them. But it got me thinking that actually Ole Miss is now the moral authority, right? They're the ones who are saying, whether you chant things about Jews or whether you chant things about black people, we're going to investigate you. And if that's not almost a business decision on their part.
They should investigate those kids. I mean, they shouldn't be hurling racial invective at anybody. So the University of Mississippi is absolutely doing the right thing in Oxford, okay? Extremism on any side is damaging, and it has to be contained. But let's get back to the big story, Columbia University. What kind of a nitwit parent would spend $75,000 to send their kid to Columbia University when the loons control the campus? Who would do that? So I assume that college is just going to go down the drain because they haven't removed the president, they haven't removed the board of trustees, and this is where all of the lunacy comes from, the boards of trustees. They're the ones responsible. They impose curriculums and campus behavior. And again, most parents, they're writing the checks, they're borrowing money, they're sending kids into environments where the children are changed because that's all they get. But I condemn all extremism here.
No, I think that's what makes it different, right? You either treat everybody fairly and equally, as you're talking about doing, and others are not. My friend, good to see you as always. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Did you get your not woke mug?
Well, actually, it's funny. I have it here on the set, okay? And it's a strong mug. Yeah, hold on. It's a strong mug, made in the USA, and I must say, a lot thicker. Keeps your drinks warmer longer than our swag mugs here, so I won't return an inferior mug to you. But I'm wondering about this, and I got 30 seconds, but then we got to run. But I want to keep you around for this. Not woke, right? I'm wondering if it's not crazy.
No, I don't want to make that judgment. I'm not a psychiatrist. But if people want a message, you go to BillO'Reilly.com, Mother's and Father's Day. You pick up a Made in USA, not woke. You give it to them. And that's a message. You're not woke. You're not a loon. You want to be fair. You want the best for your country.
Somehow crazy is not, you need a psychiatry degree, but loon, you don't need a psychiatry degree?
No, there's a difference, because crazy means you should be in an asylum. Loon means, yeah, you're misguided. It's not quite at the crazy level.
Got it. Okay, an important distinction. I got to run. See you soon. President Trump spent the weekend casting for the vice presidential season of The Apprentice. Well, killing a rattlesnake saved the North Dakota governor from getting fired. What do you make of picking a vice president that used to always be done in private? It was whispered conversations. It was long vetting. But it seemed to be different. And now, you think it's fair to say it almost feels like a season of The Apprentice?
It was what you did at 5 a.m. to start the day.
Fast forward 10 months since North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum's first ad for his presidential campaign. Burgum is now President Trump's favorite TV surrogate. He is everywhere and appears on any short list for vice president. Over the weekend, he, along with the rest of those auditioning for VP, showed up at Mar-a-Lago with President Trump and a bunch of Republican donors. With us now on set in Washington. Governor, it's nice to see you. Welcome. Welcome to D.C.
Good to be with you, Leland.
All right. A guy who grows up in a small town in North Dakota and a real estate developer from New York, two very different people. You were once quoted as saying you wouldn't do business with Donald Trump because you're judged by the company you keep. The easy answer is what's changed. The harder answer is is there a difference between doing business and defending him on TV?
Well, I think one thing I should say is, I supported President Trump in 2016.
You donated to him, right?
Yeah, and supported him in 2020 as well. And when he and I were both running for office at the same time back in 2016, both of us got elected for the first time in 2016. And boy, that was a happy night when he beat Hillary Clinton, because that changed my life as a governor of a natural resource state for sure, because it was fantastic. We got a great working relationship there. But no, I don't think he would invite me to help him design golf courses. I was a software guy for most of my life. So we were in different businesses. But I'd say right now, the thing getting to know him even better the last 3 months and where we're at and where the things that he is strong on is the stuff that Biden is weak on. Where he's had success, Biden's had failure. And I think it's very clear for America. It's very clear for everybody in our state, and certainly clear for if you're someone who, eats food, puts gas in your car, or uses electricity, you should be voting for President Trump, because he's got policies that are going to get the prices down and help make our world more secure.
What do you make of you who makes that argument pretty elegantly and talks about the issues that we hear over and over people care about, right? They care about gas prices, they care about inflation, they care about crime, they care about immigration. What do you make about you making that case so forcefully? And so often when we listen to President Trump and his rallies, a lot of it's about him and his grievances, for lack of a better term.
Well, I would say that, just having spent the weekend with President Trump and a bunch of great entrepreneurs and job creators that were there from around the country supporting him, there is across the energy, the positive energy and the theme that was there, he certainly has got a great vision for America. And if he sprinkles in a few grievances, I can understand why I'd have that, because we're at a real risk here in our country with this lawfare and a two-tier justice system, where we're literally trying to, create cases to go after someone who is likely going to be our next president. And I think that everybody understands the legal underpinnings of these, that as a business guy, I do, which is this case that's going on in New York that's getting round-the-clock coverage. This is a business filing case. This would be a misdemeanor for any other business person, and they'd probably have a low-level person in the accounting department, not the President of the United States, locked down in court 4 days a week. The whole thing is bizarre that they've even been able to try to turn it into a felony, because normally it wouldn't even be tried, and all of it's alleged.
No, I get the grievance about the New York case. We've covered it a lot. We've come down about how not only is it unusual for this prosecution to happen, every other prosecutor passed on it. And Alvin Bragg made clear exactly who he was going after when he got elected. Among those at Mar-a-Lago, it wasn't just donors and President Trump, right? It was a cast of people who you might say were trying out in one way or another for vice president, or at least on the short list based on our reporting. What do you make of picking a vice president that used to always be done in private? It was whispered conversations. It was long vetting. But it seemed to be different. And now, you think it's fair to say it almost feels like a season of The Apprentice?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand that there's nobody that understands how to drive drive media attention better than President Trump. I mean, the last episode of The Apprentice in 2015 had 28.5 million people watching, a #1 watch show in the country, which I should just say is, twice as many people that watched the first debate in Milwaukee that was absent President Trump. So the fact that he knows how to have a #1 rated show, I mean, it makes no surprise to me that he's doing that. But in terms of, people keep saying the short list, he said himself during his remarks that there was over 50 people.
But should picking the vice president, though, of the United States be a show? Should it be? Is that what it needs to be?
Well, I don't think this show trial that's going on, this sham show trial, should be a show. But America right now, there's a lot of things that maybe shouldn't be shows that are. Okay. And in the end of the day, he's going to make a decision that's going to be based on what's best for the country. You know that he's going to do that. He's going to have a lot of great choices to pick from. I think if he invited more people up on stage, there wouldn't have been room. People were practically falling off. I think there were seven.
Well played. Okay,
there were 17 people on stage.
There's been a discussion, shall we say, about another one of the people who was in Mar-a-Lago. The issue of killing animals has come up among this group of people. We noted that you two have talked, and actually back at the Iowa State Fair, you talked about how to kill a particular animal, that being a rattlesnake. Take a listen.
They're coiled up. They're very hard to inflict the appropriate injury on. But if you get them snaking through the grass and then their spine is exposed, you can take a lariat across their back. And if you do that, then that stuns them. And you stun them, then you go there and then you step on their head with your boot, and then you just pull on the back, and then their head comes off.
Once you kill the rattlesnake, are they pretty tasty?
Well, this context of this was at the Iowa State Fair. Yeah. I was with the Ruthless podcast team.
Great guys.
And they said, hey, let's get together for some fair food. And at the Iowa State Fair, they had rattlesnake nachos with venom sauce. And the Ruthless guys had never had rattlesnake before, so we had it over, there and had that.
So I have to understand this, though, okay? Because this is video with you guys in the Ruthless podcast in discussing rattlesnakes. I didn't know rattlesnake was an option, though, because maybe this is a good question, because when our interview happened at the Iowa State Fair, it was with an egg. Take a listen.
I think this is just a very standard hard-boiled egg.
Very standard hard-boiled egg?
Okay. Yep.
Very standard hard-boiled egg. How is it that Ruthless got the story of how to kill rattlesnakes and I got an egg?
Yeah.
Nobody looks cool eating an egg.
No, but you and I did get to go through the line to see, instead of seeing the butter cow, but next to the butter cow was the butter Caitlin Clark, who's gone on to great fame. They had her carved out of butter as well.
This is true. All right. Next time we will have something other than an egg. Governor, it's good to see you as always.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember cancel culture? Somehow all those social justice warriors faded into the shadow. Have comedians finally won the war on woke?
If there are any weak or fragile men, we don't mean to shame you. But understand, you don't have to take no for an answer. Go in the game with some real women and whoop the out of them if you want to. It's in the real news. Take that down before they try to cancel me for telling the truth.
America, the pendulum always swings too far. That, of course, happened over the past few years with cancel culture. You couldn't say anything. But it's swinging back. Now to the point that we can't even air much of a recent Netflix special. Here are some of the tamer jokes from last night's roast of football great Tom Brady.
Tom Brady, 5-time Super Bowl MVP, most career wins, most career touchdowns. You have 7 rings. Well, 8 now that Giselle gave hers back, but...
And Julian is going to change his name to Jillian and move in with Tom. Just 2 little boys prancing around.
NewsNation contributor, founding editor of Mediaite, Colby Hall, joins me. Is this that significant of a moment?
Well, I think so. I think it's great news. Before there was cancel culture, there was the politically correct movement, right? Like, you had to be politically correct. And then that was used to sort of chill free speech. And then it sort of went crazy. And I think what we're seeing now, and I don't know if it's a result of the Biden administration or the campus protests, but this Netflix roast, which was 3 hours, was filled with, like, I mean, it would have made Don Rickles blush. I mean, there was every possible trope was made fun of in a way that was hilarious, and no one got offended because, of course, everyone was just joking. There was gay jokes, there was Jewish jokes, there was short jokes, and it was, you know, I'd like to think that here we are. Maybe we've kind of come through the other side.
Let me give you a different read on that, and you tell me what you think if I'm being fair here. The mob cancel culture requires scalps, right? That's what it lives off of. And the first group that stands up and says no, it proves that the emperor, the mob, has no clothes, right? Because then they have to quickly move on to the next scalp. Otherwise, it has no power. It's the first person to stand up to the bully. And Netflix did, right, with Dave Chappelle. They said enough. We said, we're not dealing with this. Jokes are jokes. We're not going to limit comedy. Have a nice life. And maybe that's why the mob's not coming for them. There's a lesson there.
Well, I think Netflix has definitely shown some bravery here and some real leadership. And they're really, this Netflix is a joke movement. They're really making themselves like the place for comedy. And frankly, comedy can't really exist in a world of cancel culture. Like, comedy is all about, you know, if it bends, it's funny. If it breaks, it's not. Like, you always need to be sort of like pushing that line. And if everyone is going to sort of be offended by whatever is said, so yeah, Netflix deserves a ton of credit. And I think the dynamic that you said around Chappelle and other comedians have been really vocal about this as well. Jerry Seinfeld, for example, recently said that, you know, he really laid into cancel culture and political correctness, in his eyes, have ruined comedy. So I think you're seeing them reclaim a territory in the name of entertainment, and we're better for it. It's good news.
Well, and also in the name of being able to make a buck, because it's hard to have comedy if you don't offend somebody. Colby, always good to see you. Thank you, my friend. We appreciate it. A lot of news this week to get to, including what will be in War Notes tomorrow. Is President Biden planning on bowing out? There's some very interesting leaks coming out of the White House. WarNotes.com to subscribe. Here's Chris.